Unit 1.1, Lesson 5, Density. In order to differentiate between different forms of matter, we can examine their intrinsic properties such as density. Density is the measure of the mass of a substance per unit volume. It is really a ratio between how much mass makes up a substance and the amount of volume that it takes up. Differences in density explain why two objects may have identical volumes but different masses, or identical masses but different volumes. While the mass and volume of a given substance can change, density does not. As a result of this lesson, you'll be able to define density as the amount of mass in a certain space, solve problems for density, mass, or volume using the equation that relates those three terms, and explain how and why density can be used to identify a substance. Density can be defined as the amount of substance or mass in a certain space, or the mass per unit volume. For purposes of comparison, scientists use 1 cubic centimeter as the unit of volume being considered. However, instead of trying to measure a 1 centimeter cube of a substance, you can simply divide the entire mass of an object by its volume in cubic centimeters. Density is an intrinsic property that does not change with the size, shape, or amount of substance being considered. Intrinsic properties such as color, hardness, and density do not depend on the amount, size, or shape of matter and can be used to help identify that substance. Extrinsic properties such as mass and volume can change depending on the amount of matter being considered. Mass or volume alone can't help you identify a substance, but density can. However, density changes with temperature. If they are at the same temperature, aluminum foil has the same density as an aluminum screw or an aluminum ladder. Some categories of substances have a range of densities. For example, the densities of plastics or cooking oil may vary depending on the type of plastic or oil. Density can be used to identify what a substance is made of. The measurements and density calculations you made in class allowed you to identify the gold-colored and silver-colored rods. This table shows some common materials and their densities. Gold is the densest metal of those given in the table, even denser than lead. In order to determine the density of an object, both the mass and the volume are needed. Archimedes could find the density of the crown if he measured both its volume and its mass. He could then compare the density of the crown to the density of gold. The density of one of our golden pennies turns out to be around 7.2 grams per milliliter, or grams per cubic centimeter. Too low a value to be gold, which has a density of 19.3 grams per cubic centimeter. However, it appears that the pennies are not made entirely of copper either, because the density value is also lower than that of copper. Wrapping up the lesson. How can you use mass and volume to determine the identity of a substance? One substance can be distinguished from another by examining its intrinsic physical properties, such as density. Density is a measure of the mass per unit volume of a substance. The density of any given substance is always the same, as long as the temperature remains constant.